Okay, so I just got through letting the day students know that they're not required to stick around here. Give me just 1 second. I started the recording. So I have to close my door because I have a 5-year-old who likes to bust in here and interrupt me if I'm not careful. So today I want to kind of tie up some loose ends that I started in the last video. I know I titled it Acts 1, 2, and 2. However, what I really want to do with this video series, I haven't thought about it over the weekend, is I don't want to bog down so much in covering each act of the play from start to finish, because I think you can lose a lot of the big picture concepts as a result of doing that. So what I want to do is really focus on the topics for your paper, which we have 4, and in relation to the play Hamlet, and how those topics can be explored and broadened and discussed and analyzed in your paper. So as we started the lecture the other day, Hamlet at its very core is a play that really deep dives into the concept of monarchy, and specifically in relation to the monarchy, the act of succession, which in this case, as we see at the beginning of the play Hamlet, Hamlet's father has died, and instead of, as tradition, the prince taking over in this story, his uncle usurps the throne, and on top of that marries his mother in the process, in order to legitimize his kingship, and kind of adopts Hamlet almost as a son figure at this point. And we do have instances throughout history where that takes place. Thinking off the top of my head, Richard III, who was technically the last Plantagenet, but also the last of the houses of York. You know, that famous story about the Wars of the Roses. Richard III usurped the throne from his nephew, Edward. And of course, his younger brother, I think his name was Richard as well. But anyway, that's a case where you have someone, a close family member, who usurps the throne. Now, usurpation is something that you see throughout the history of Western European monarchies, specific, you know, not only in England but also in France, and some of the other, even when Germany had a king there for a short time. So you have a lot of instances, and then even in Scotland as well. So there's a lot of different examples that you can pull from and talk about this act of usurpation. But again, it's a fine line when you're analyzing the institution of monarchy. It's a fine, very fragile thing. It's a very fragile thread that binds that together, which is religion and politics. If you do not have the support of the church, that can undermine your authority to rule. But at the same time, if you do not have the ideal political situation in place, where a king in himself is not able to rule unilaterally, you must have the support of the houses of what we call the nobility, the aristocracy. They're in place to prop up your crown and your throne, in order to maintain that fragile instance of political rule. And we see that here in Hamlet, a little bit of an indication of how fragile that relationship is between the aristocracy, who rules at the top, and then the common people and the peasants who are at the bottom. And like I said, faith and religion has always been an institution that has kind of propped up the monarchy, according to the worldview that the ancient houses had the right to rule, that they were blessed by God in doing so. And you got to remember, a lot of these European monarchies look to the Bible when God created the institution of monarchy through King David in those Hebrew stories. Many of the European monarchies look back to that instance as a justification and validation for their right to rule. And through the influence and tenets of the church, that political structure stayed intact for several hundred years, almost well over 1,500 years. I mean, it's still in some ways in power today, specifically, you know, with the UK, with the Queen Elizabeth II's rule. But unlike then, her power is extremely limited. So we don't really look at Queen Elizabeth in the same light as we would, say, a Henry VIII or even Henry II, who was the first Plantagenet king. And they used the power of the church to wield their religious power, or their power through religion, and then they use the power of the aristocracy and the noble houses to wield political power. And again, religion and politics go hand in hand. I know we have a tradition here in the United States where we try to separate those powers, but historically in Western civilization, they have always ruled hand by hand or hand in hand. So again, the whole concept of monarchy and the fragility of the monarchy can be viewed here in Hamlet, in the fact that the act of succession was not honored, according to the tradition, that a usurper was allowed to come to the throne, taking a place that was not rightfully his. Very similar to what you see in The Lion King, right? When Mufasa's brother Scar ends up killing him, and really Simba should have taken his place at on top of Pride Rock, but instead his uncle Scar took over, and you saw that the ruin that takes place in that story. Hamlet is very similar in the fact that we get little inferences from the conversation here and there that not every noble house in Denmark is happy with the fact that Claudius has taken over. In fact, that's one of the reasons why Claudius is seen a lot with Gertrude at the beginning of the play, in order to kind of solidify and give a little more integrity and justification for his right to rule, trying to appease the noble houses. And again, we're going to talk about Polinius and his children and how their influence plays into this. Because as we see at the beginning of the play, that Polinius specifically is very much in alliance with Claudius, the new king. Now, what we don't know is, and I haven't really, I need to do a little research into this myself, is what is the political status or social status of Polinius? It looks like that he is a top aristocratic figure, but we can ascertain from it that he's not necessarily of a noble birth. He's probably indicative of this merchant class that has started to rise and take power slowly during the Renaissance period. Again, Shakespeare is writing this from a Renaissance point of view, so some of these topics that we're going to talk about are very applicable even to the play Hamlet. So with the House of Polinius, having said that, we need to look at what significance does his house represent to the overall contemporary culture. Well, if you look at it in this instance, what happened prior to Queen Elizabeth sitting on the throne, which is the monarch who's ruling when Shakespeare writes and presents this play, produces this play. Her father, Henry VIII, was considered to be one of the first Renaissance princes, and broke with tradition in presenting honor to the nobles who fit closely with his inner circle. What you see previous to that point is you always have these monarchs who present a lot of honors, a lot of tribute, so to speak, gold, gifts, jewels, stuff like that, titles, more land, to aristocrats who closely are integrated into their circle and kind of support their right to rule. Henry VIII, when he came up, was very distrusting of aristocrats, not surprising, because of the fact that his father's right to rule. Remember, Henry VII was the first Tudor king who sat on the throne, won his crown on the battlefield, and brought two houses that were warring over the crown together through his marriage to Elizabeth of York. But Henry VII was very distrusting of the aristocrats, even though they pledged fealty, pledged allegiance to his right to rule. He was always suspecting that because he usurped the throne on the battlefield, that they would somehow threaten his right to rule by some kind of conspiracy. He was very much a conspiracy theorist. Henry VIII took that to the next level. So much, in fact, that the only people that Henry VIII would really honor in a public ceremony, either with a knighthood or a nobility, a title to expand their land and influence within the political system. You see the new men of the day, the merchant class, starting to rise up, who saw an opportunity with Henry VIII distrusting the old aristocrats. They saw an opportunity there to somehow purchase a legitimacy of their own and title of their own. So Henry VIII was one of these monarchs that tried to cast the old aristocrats aside, and at the same time tried to solidify his power around bringing up common people and giving them a legitimate title during his rule. Claudius is probably doing something very similar here because, again, we are talking about a usurper. And Polinius would be the perfect person to do that. Again, we don't see where he wasn't introduced as a lord or a duke. Therefore, he probably does not have some kind of aristocratic title. But he is a rich man. He has to be in order to have this kind of influence and ear of the king. So he's probably one of these new men, this rise of the merchant class that we see during Henry VIII's time, trying to take advantage of a political situation in order to work it to his advantage. And that's probably one of the reasons why Claudius leans on Polinius when Claudius starts to suspect Hamlet is acting weird, he's acting strange. What does he know? Is he a threat to my rule? Polinius is one of the first people that Claudius goes to concoct some kind of spying plan. Okay, so remember, Hamlet gets this quest from his father, the ghost of his father, in order to identify and force Claudius to reveal his treachery, not only in a familial sense, but also in a treasonous sense, because, as a brother, he committed, a sin against his family member, but as a subject, he committed treason against his king. So it's kind of a double jeopardy there. And so Hamlet is spying on Claudius through the use of these plays to gauge Claudius's reaction and try to get some kind of awareness and information through his reaction, whether or not what he's been told is true. At the same time, considering the nature of the plays. Now, remember, in these plays that Hamlet is putting on, It has to do with a king being killed. It has to do with a woman that marries again, and she ends up marrying the brother of her dead husband. These are Greek and Latin plays that have the certain mythology around them that Hamlet is using to gauge the reaction of his uncle and his mother to see if the guilt comes on their face. And if the guilt comes on their face and they realize what they've done is wrong, then that would be an indication to him that, yeah, they are indeed guilty of treason here against my father. So that, again, that's his quest. He's trying to identify who the culprits are, who the conspirators were, whether or not what he was told was true, and then carry out some kind of revenge against Claudius. At the same time, Claudius is not stupid, right? He can't be stupid because he's a usurper. He's on the throne for a reason. He's very smart. He's very wily, but at the same time, he's very paranoid. He's very distrusting of people around him. And really, the only person he does trust halfway is Polinius. And so Polinius is that confidant that Claudius goes to in order to concoct some kind of plan to reverse spy on Hamlet. We need to keep him close. We need to identify what he knows, because his conscience is getting the best of him here. So again, the revenge arc that Shakespeare is trying to paint here is creating this conflict, this drama, because it's not a conflict that's just out in the open, face value. This is one that is a silent conflict behind the scenes. You have these small skirmishes, and again, you can kind of forecast where we're going here. Because we're going to use manipulation, and we're going to use deceit, and we're going to conceal our intentions here on both sides in order to accomplish what we want to, which in Hamlet's case, he's trying to identify that Claudius is indeed the person that killed his father, and what the ghost of his father told him is true. At the same time, Claudius is going to try to set up an alliance of his own with Claudius and Gertrude to identify what is it that Hamlet knows. And we're going to use deception. We're going to use secret conversations in order to bring about this awareness. Okay. So again, that's the situation here. We don't have two armies on the battlefield that we would expect in this situation that we've seen throughout history. With two opposing forces who claim a right to rule, meeting on the battlefield and duking it out face to face. We have two characters here who are more cerebral, very paranoid. This is the dark side of politics that Shakespeare is trying to bring to the light here. And this gives you an indication of what the nature of politics was in Renaissance period. Okay. Now, in what ways is it different than medieval period? Well, in medieval period, I'm not saying that there wasn't spies out there and information is being shared and conspiracy theories, but medieval monarchs and nobles were more apt to charge the battlefield and resolve their disputes on the field of battle than they were in the Renaissance period. Mainly because in the Renaissance period, it was very expensive to carry out large campaigns over feats of revenge. And then, of course, the concept of the politics changed over time as well. In Renaissance period, specifically, you can see this in the court of Henry VIII. Spies were used to keep tabs on people, to find out what they know and what they didn't know, and what if there were conspiracies there, who were involved. And so the conflicts were not out in the open as they were in the dark period, as the Renaissance people called it. They referred to the medieval period as the dark days and the evil days of war and bloodshed. Not to say that they were, that was a little bit of, I don't know, I'm escaping me right now, but anyway, they were not kind of sanctimonious in a way, because the way that politics was carried out in the Renaissance period was in some ways more cruel. People could be accused of conspiracy without any kind of evidence whatsoever. As you saw, or you can see in the history of Henry VIII's reign. So here's what I want to do in this, and with this revenge arc, we basically have this Renaissance style conspiracy network here set up between Hamlet and those closest to him, mainly Horatio is helping him here. Then we have Claudius and Polinius on the other side, who are other side of the chessboard, who, along with Gertrude, how committed she is to this whole thing, we really don't know. I'm of the opinion she was somewhere in the middle. She understood the political situation of the day, so she wanted to make sure that she protected herself by aligning herself with the next king, but at the same time, being a mother, she was making these decisions not only in the interest of herself, but also her son as well, to keep him safe. So we have these two sides that are positioned here. Claudius and Polinius on one side, who are trying to manipulate the situation and gather intel. And of course, Hamlet and his colleague Horatio were trying to do the same thing. Hamlet is using plays, specifically plays that have a certain context to it, as it applies to the events in Hamlet. He's trying to gauge the reaction of his mother, who married the brother of her dead husband, Claudius, who has usurped the throne. Both are considered to be sins according to faith and religion of the times in the Catholic Church and even the old Protestant Church. So there's a little bit of faith and religion, and we'll talk more about that on Thursday. But again, we've got both sides of the chessboard. Now, the one question that a lot of people fail to ask here is, what about Fortinbras, the Prince of Norway, who is leading a military expedition near the area, of course, into this useless plot of land in Poland? What is his true intentions here? Well, as we'll see at the end of the play, I think we pretty much know what his intentions are, and we can probably lay some theories here that maybe he is the instigator in all this. I mean, think about it. The Prince of Norway has more to gain from the collapse of the House of Hamlet than anybody. And so you could insinuate or theorize that somehow the Prince of Norway is playing a game here, a Renaissance style game, in that I want to take the Kingdom of Norway. I can do it two ways. One, militarily, which is going to cost me a lot of money and a lot of manpower, because wars are very expensive. Or I, considering the fragile nature of the political system inside of Denmark, between the boy prince who should be king and his uncle, the usurper, maybe I can have an opportunity here to help facilitate the collapse of the house by themselves, and I'm just kind of providing the spark to do that. So again, very fragile political situation here, from internally and also externally. I'm going to pause the video right here and take a quick drink and kind of refresh, and I'll come back in a few minutes. I'm just going to pause the video. You're not even going to see a difference here. So let me pause it and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. All right, I'm back. So let's continue. So in the discussion of revenge, where does this take us now that we've got Claudius on one side and Hamlet on the other, using their various methods? Well, as you can see at the end of the play, Laertes plays a part in this because of a political alliance that he's forged. Again, as we said, Claudius's reign is not one that's completely stable. We've got many aristocrats, has been intimated, there's many aristocrats who are not totally in line with his right to rule. And Laertes is playing on that. It's one of the reasons why he took so many expeditions to France, diplomatic expeditions, to forge these alliances to possibly gauge whether he had an opportunity to take over through political means, of course. But anyway, Laertes has entered into this fragile alliance along with Polinius and Claudius, and is going to be the tool, the instrument to finally rid Claudius of this thorn in his side, which is Hamlet, because he knows Hamlet is aware of his treachery and tries on a couple of occasions through political means to exterminate Hamlet. And of course, Hamlet foiled the plot. Specifically, I'm referring to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and that whole scene with the switching of the letter to the King of England, asking him to kill Hamlet. But through the switch of the letter, Hamlet has instructed the king to kill Rosencrantz Guildenstern. So you see these instances where both sides are not very tactful. Hamlet probably more so, because I think he's got a tighter grip on the situation, but Claudius is trying, extinguishing every option that he has to rid himself of this thorn. And of course, Laertes is going to come to the forefront and serve as that instrument, namely because in their attempts to identify Hamlet as a treasonous suspect against the crown, their spying plot, the last one that they carried out against Hamlet using Gertrude as a plant, went afoul when Polinius was hiding behind the shade or the tapestry. And of course, Hamlet thought that was Claudius, and he ends up killing Polonius. Of course, when Laertes finds out that's what happened, of course, he sees as an opportunity not only to avenge his father, but also to bring about a political situation that could be advantageous for him to possibly take power. And so you got multiple revenge plots here between Hamlet and Claudius against Hamlet, and then also Laertes against Hamlet for the killing of his father. And of course, all of these revenge plots, these secret conversations, this conspiring behind people's backs. How does William Shakespeare view this new political climate that has come about in Renaissance times compared to the more out in the open, in your face medieval period? Well, we can ascertain that he looked upon it very disfavorably because of the way Hamlet the end of the play turns out, with pretty much all of the characters, the main characters, meeting an untimely death as a result of their treachery and their deceit, and their maddening quest for selfish reasons, really. So again, the revenge arc is the main one in Hamlet. You've got several different arcs that you can analyze. Basically, if I were writing about that, I would look at each individual characters who are plotting some type of revenge arc, and then find some kind of historical context, or maybe some psychological context as to an explanation as to why those characters are reacting in the manner that they did. The second topic I want to talk about before I make this, I don't want to make these videos too lengthy because it takes a lot of processing time to convert these over to a YouTube format and upload them. So I'm going to leave the two last topics off for Thursday. The last one I want to talk about for today is Hamlet's relationship with women. In some cases, it can be easily explained why Hamlet is so distrustful of women. Number one, his mother. His mother quickly remarried after the death of his father. His mother did not support his claim to the throne, was so willing to throw her lot in with her brother-in-law, now new husband, which, disenfranchised Hamlet, denied him his birthright. And then on the other side, you've got this relationship with his Juliet, so to speak, Ophelia, who's the daughter of Polonius. They're childhood friends and love interests, but since the death of Hamlet's father, they become estranged. And then when the events of Hamlet's father's death were revealed to him, they became even hostile. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we can look at the conversation that took place between Hamlet and Ophelia when he said, "Get thee to a nunnery." It's hard to pick up on that kind of language in full context. But in Shakespeare's time, we would have taken that as somewhat of a double entendre. One, you can take it literally in the fact that Hamlet, let's look at it in this context. Let's say that the relationship estranged between Hamlet and Ophelia for one of two reasons. One, she could have been a conspirator, considering the fact that Polonius was so close to Claudius, that she somehow was in the know about what was going on and what happened to his father. In that case, she would have been a treacherous traitor and someone that Hamlet no longer could trust to be his future queen when he comes into his power. At the same respect, that's probably less likely. In Renaissance times, young women were not looked upon as being very intelligent, even though that's not the case, or was not the case. That was just the overall cultural perspective, especially young maidens who were in the court. They were looked at as political opportunities for advancement if marriages proved to be advantageous. But intrinsically, their value was very little other than political advantage, and then also the ability to produce a son and heir. And Ophelia in this probably had this same kind of perception. So it's more reasonable to me to ascertain that she was probably unaware of all of the political wranglings that were going on behind the scenes. She was a young, innocent girl who was in love with her prince. And Hamlet's view on her could have been taken in one of two ways. That in that case, she was unaware of what was going on, and therefore that made her a threat, because it would cause him to lose focus on his quest. At the same time, it could have been that he was trying to protect her from the coming revenge arc, the consequences of that revenge arc. So the phrase "get thee to a nunnery," when we hear those words uttered from Hamlet, one, of course, a nunnery is a monastery that's for nuns in the Catholic religion. And that was usually the place of choice whenever a young female was caught up in a scandal. That was an option that she had in order to either possibly save her life if she was involved in some kind of political plot or threat, or if it was politically or in the romantic sense, advantageous for the husband to put his wife away and to take a new wife if he wanted to produce more children, if she was no longer able to do so. The nunnery was an option in order to allow her to bow out of that social scene with some kind of honor and remove herself from the situation. Now, that's one context that get thee to a nunnery can be taken in. The other one is more of a Protestant viewpoint. Again, we're talking about the rise of Protestantism that took place during the Renaissance times, and the Protestant faith that sprung up, the evangelical faith that sprung up during this time period was did not look favorably upon old Catholic traditions, which they thought were antiquated and possibly no longer needed because they were corrupting in some way. And many times the Protestants validated their viewpoints by demonizing monasteries, the use of monasteries and nunneries out there, that they were somehow extorting money from people, and they were kind of like the treasure keepers for the Catholic faith. Not saying that some were not guilty of doing that, but as a whole, the institution, it was kind of unfair that they threw that aspersion on them. And so for the Protestants during this time, we were looking for a political advantage. They used the term nunnery to mean a brothel, people who prostituted themselves for some kind of political or monetary gain. Again, it was a political propaganda of the day. So in that respect, you could see that Hamlet was either trying to save Ophelia from the coming wrath of and the events that's going to take place at the end of Hamlet, or in his cruel nature and misogynistic attitudes towards Ophelia. Either way, it was a huge insult. Either to say that she was not worthy of marriage, therefore you should go to a nunnery and give yourself to God, or that in some ways he was accusing her of conspiring with her father and his uncle to deny him of his birthright and to murder his father, that she somehow prostituted herself and allowed her soul to be corrupted by these people who were promising some kind of advantage if she supported them or helped them with Hamlet or whatnot. So the roots of Hamlet's distrust, we can clearly see in the events of the play. One, that Gertrude was so quick to remarry, and the person that she chose, of course, was his uncle and her brother-in-law, that soon to be her new husband. And then, of course, Ophelia, because of the political ramifications that were going on, and somehow that she may have been involved in the plot, or if she was not involved with the plot, he just didn't think her worthy enough to assist him or even to trust to help him carry out his revenge arc and whatnot. So we can see that this Renaissance attitude come out in Hamlet, of, again, women were viewed in this time period as being tools, political advantageous when helpful, but not respected as people as they should have been. Now, again, that's generalization. Not everyone in the culture during that time period felt that way, and not all subcultures or other multiple cultures felt that way. But we're just looking at specifically England, because Shakespeare, again, is making commentary on Renaissance culture during this time. Now, some people will have asked me, well, then how do you justify Queen Elizabeth sitting on the throne? She was a woman. Well, yes, she was. However, she did not rule as a woman. And she even made several comments throughout her reign that I may have the body of a woman, but I have the heart of a prince. In other words, don't mistake me and the fact that I'm a woman, don't mistake my demeanor and my institution for weakness, that I am more than willing to rule just as a man would. And again, that is the perception that Renaissance culture had upon the female gender, and that they were the weaker sex and the gentler sex and easily manipulated and easily corrupted. And honestly, as cruel as this sounds, it's not a viewpoint that I hold up. But according to Renaissance culture, they really only had one great purpose, and that was to beget not just a child. I've heard people say that before. Yeah, to produce children. Well, no, it was, you had to quantify it. They had to produce male children. Specifically, if they happened to be royals, it was extremely important. Because of the act of succession, you have to have a male child who's legitimate in place so that your family name carries on and that your family continues to rule. That was the predominant thought of the day. And if a woman failed to do that, that was her one great failure, because that's one thing that they felt that women could take pride in, is the fact that I beget the son and heir for my husband, my lord, my king, whatnot. So a lot of these attitudes that Hamlet has and displays in the play towards Ophelia and Gertrude, some of them have to do with the events and the plot of the play, but a lot of them carry over from Renaissance culture. And William Shakespeare is making commentary while he's writing this play on, some of these perceptions that we throw out there, these expectations that we throw out there on women tend to be unfair, and they were unfair. And again, Shakespeare knew women better than some women did. Honestly, he knew how to write female characters. He knew how to express their thoughts and feelings from a feminine point of view. And specifically, he knew a lot of these historical references to women who tended to be really strong in thought and in power. Again, Gertrude, for all of her treachery, according to Hamlet, was just executing one of the oldest tricks in the book, in that she was able to use her powers to survive and to persevere. Again, Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was the wife of Henry II, was a skilled political strategist and knew exactly how to manipulate men, using her powers of political persuasion to basically manipulate men into doing what she wanted them to do. It was one of the reasons why she survived as long as she did. She's a fascinating woman. So if you want to write about the topic number 2, Hamlet's relationship with women, and use some historical context to give some academic evidence backing up, I lost my train of thought, the historical context around Gertrude. Eleanor of Aquitaine is an absolute perfect example to do some comparisons there in the relationship of women. The way in which Henry II treated Eleanor was very, very similar to the way that Hamlet treated Ophelia during this play. Now, the outcomes were different, of course. Ophelia ends up going mad, not only because of Hamlet's rejection, but also the fact that her father dies unexpectedly. And all of those things just weighed upon her mind to the point where she embraced death at that point. Of course, Gertrude dies in a dishonorable way as a result of her new second husband's treachery. Innocent bystander, or was she? A lot of people say that Eleanor was an innocent part in all of the events that took place between Henry II and his sons, but at the same time, was she? Did she bring about some of those consequences on herself? Again, those are things that you can analyze and cross-reference in an analytical paper of this topic. Okay, all right. Again, I'm going to close the video here. I think I've talked long enough on those two topics. I'm going to come back on Thursday. and talk a little bit about religion and faith in Hamlet, and also decay and death. And as I was telling a student who logged on a while ago, death and decay is a fascinating topic inside of Hamlet. Can cover multiple different angles. And on Thursday, I'm going to offer you an additional one to think about in relation to the monarchy. So be sure to tune in either, again, as I told my day students, you're welcome to log on here. I'm not going to be asking questions or interacting with people. Although I could take your questions live if you have any, so feel free to log on and ask questions if you want. Or if you have a lot of things going on right now, feel free to carry out your business, whatever you need to do. The videos will be available late in the afternoon, posted to YouTube, and then I'll link them on Blackboard. Okay. So for my 3009 class, or 90 class, which is the 11 o'clock day class, and then also the 30089 online class, this video is applicable to both. Again, I'll have a video on Thursday that's related to both classes. I pretty much was able to keep them in sync here, so this is working out perfectly. Again, if you have any questions or comments about the play Hamlet and the paper, reach out to me on email. And also, if you have questions or comments about the play in itself and how you can use some aspects to your paper, please send those in as well, because what I will do is I'll use those questions as a Q&A session at the beginning of the next video. Okay, thanks. And I will talk to you again. Everybody have a great day, and I'll talk to you again real soon.